My name is Camila Rodriguez, and at 29 I finally opened Golden Crumb Bakery, the dream I'd been chasing since I was 12 years old. After hand-delivering personal invitations to every member of my family, I stood completely alone in my beautiful new shop on opening day, watching my phone light up with notifications from my brother David's engagement announcement party. The same party every single family member chose to attend instead of supporting the biggest day of my life. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Before I tell you how my own family crushed my dreams on what should have been my proudest moment, let me know in the comments what city you're watching from and smash that subscribe button if you've ever felt invisible to the people who should love you most. Picture this, it's 6 a.m. on a crisp October morning in Millbrook, a charming town in upstate New York where autumn leaves create the perfect backdrop for new beginnings. I'm standing in my bakery, surrounded by display cases I'd spent months planning, filled with pastries I'd been perfecting for years. The morning sunlight streams through the large windows I'd specifically chosen because they reminded me of my late grandmother's kitchen where my love for baking first bloomed. Everything was perfect. The hand-painted sign reading Golden Crumb Bakery, where every bite tells a story, gleamed in the morning light. The vintage copper mixing bowls I'd collected over the years sat artfully arranged on open shelving. Fresh flowers from the local farmers market brightened every table. The air was thick with the intoxicating scents of cinnamon, vanilla, and freshly baked sourdough that had been rising since 3 a.m. But as the clock struck 9 a.m. and I turned the ornate brass key to officially open my doors, my heart began to sink. The parking lot remained empty except for my own car. My phone stayed silent except for automated notifications from my business accounts. The family I'd spent weeks preparing special treats for, each one crafted with memories of our shared moments, was nowhere to be found. You see, 3 weeks earlier, my brother David had announced his engagement to his longtime girlfriend Priscilla, and they'd decided to throw a spontaneous celebration brunch at the Riverside Country Club on the exact same morning as my grand opening. When I gently reminded everyone about the conflict during our family dinner, the response was swift and telling. Davy's engagement only happens once, my mother Patricia declared, using the childhood nickname that always made my 31-year-old brother beam with pride. My father Robert, a successful real estate developer who measured everything in dollar signs and social status, nodded in agreement. The country club is expecting us, Mija. You understand how important networking is for the family business. My sister Lucia, 2 years younger but somehow always treated as the responsible one, had looked at me with what she probably thought was sympathy. Cam, you can have a soft opening any day. David's moment can't be rescheduled. Besides, the country club crowd includes potential clients for your little bakery. My little bakery. The word still stung 3 weeks later as I stood alone among my life's work. I'd spent the previous evening arranging special display cards next to pastries I'd created specifically for my family. Patricia's passion fruit tarts, delicate, refined, just like my mother's carefully curated image. Robert's power breakfast Danish, hearty, substantial, designed for a man who attacked each day like a business deal. David's champion chocolate croissants, rich and indulgent, celebrating the golden boy who could do no wrong. Lucia's lovely lemon bars, bright and cheerful, like the sister who always seemed to effortlessly balance everyone's expectations. Each creation represented hours of testing, tweaking, and perfecting. I'd imagined their faces lighting up when they saw their names, when they tasted how I'd captured their personalities in flour, butter, and sugar. I'd pictured my mother posting elegant photos on her social media, my father discussing potential catering opportunities with his wealthy friends, David and Priscilla considering me for their wedding desserts. Instead, I watched through my large windows as the occasional neighbor walked by, some pausing to read my grand opening banner, others hurrying past with their morning coffee from the chain store 3 blocks away. A few brave souls ventured in during the first hour, Mrs. Henderson from the flower shop next door, bringing congratulations and a small potted orchid, Tom Chin, the mailman, who ordered a simple coffee and blueberry muffin but stayed for 20 minutes, fascinated by my stories of recipe development. But with each passing hour, the absence of my family became more glaring. The empty tables seemed to mock my optimism. The family-named pastries remained largely untouched, their personalized cards becoming painful reminders of my naive hope that blood relations meant unconditional support. By noon, my phone had buzzed exactly 17 times. Not with congratulations or apologies from my family, but with notifications from my brother's engagement party. Photo after photo filled my social media feeds, champagne toasts at elegantly set tables, my parents beaming with pride as they posed with the happy couple, my sister catching the practice bouquet toss, the entire Rodriguez family celebrating love and new beginnings. Every image was a dagger to my heart, not just because they'd chosen David's moment over mine, but because of how genuinely happy they all looked without me there. The family photos were complete in their minds. My absence didn't create a gap that needed filling. The most devastating moment came when I saw my mother's Instagram post, celebrating our successful son David's engagement to his beautiful fiancée. So proud of our family's achievements and bright future together. The post had 247 likes and dozens of comments from family friends, business associates, and extended relatives, many of whom I'd personally invited to my opening, all of whom were apparently at the country club instead. As the afternoon crowd thinned and the reality of my situation became undeniable, I realized this wasn't just about a missed grand opening. This was about a pattern I'd been too hopeful to acknowledge, my family's inability to see value in anything that didn't fit their narrow definition of success. My bakery wasn't just absent from their social media posts, it was absent from their understanding of what constituted a worthwhile life achievement. Standing there among my beautiful pastries and empty tables, I faced a truth that would change everything. Sometimes the people who should champion your dreams the most are the ones who understand them the least. And sometimes, the most important grand opening isn't the one where everyone shows up, it's the one where you finally realize who you're really baking for. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. To understand why my family's absence cut so deeply, you need to know about the Rodriguez family empire and the very specific definition of success that ruled our household in Millbrook. My father, Robert Rodriguez, built his reputation as the most successful commercial real estate developer in the Hudson Valley. Rodriguez Properties wasn't just a business, it was a legacy, a symbol of what immigrant families could achieve in America. Dad's office walls were covered with framed photos of ribbon cuttings, handshakes with mayors and city council members, and newspaper clippings celebrating each new shopping complex or office building that bore his company's signature. "We don't just build structures, Mija," he would tell me during childhood visits to his construction sites. "We build dreams, communities, futures. This is what real impact looks like." His voice carried the weight of a man who had started with nothing and created something that changed skylines and employed hundreds of people. Dad worked 12-hour days, 6 days a week, and even Sundays often involved site visits or client dinners at the country club. Every conversation somehow circled back to square footage, zoning permits, or profit margins. Success was measured in tangible assets, buildings you could see from the highway, bank statements that reflected steady growth, and most importantly, social recognition from other successful business owners in our community. My mother, Patricia Rodriguez, managed to perfectly balance her role as a high school principal with maintaining our family's social standing in Millbrook's elite circles. She ran Jefferson High School with the same precision she used to organize charity galas and country club fundraisers. Mom's calendar was a masterpiece of color-coded efficiency, red for school board meetings, blue for community events, gold for family obligations that required the right appearance and perfect coordination. Every achievement in our household was evaluated not just for its personal merit, but for how it reflected on the Rodriguez family brand. Report cards weren't just about grades, they were about maintaining our reputation as the family that produced successful, ambitious children. Extracurricular activities weren't just about personal growth, they were about building college applications that would impress our parents' social circle. "People are always watching, Camila," Mom would remind me while helping me choose outfits for school events. "They see how our children present themselves, how they achieve, how they represent our family values. Excellence isn't optional, it's expected." My older brother David embodied everything my parents valued. At 31, he was a senior analyst at Thornfield Investment Group, one of the most prestigious financial firms in Albany. His corner office overlooked the state capitol building, and his client list included some of the wealthiest families in New York State. David drove a BMW, owned a downtown condo with exposed brick walls and floor-to-ceiling windows, and dated women who worked in marketing or law, always ambitious, always polished, always photographable for social media. David's success wasn't just personal, it was proof that the Rodriguez family formula worked. He'd followed the prescribed path: excellent grades at Millbrook High, business degree from Syracuse University, internships at respected firms, steady climb up the corporate ladder. His achievements were quantifiable, comparable, and most importantly, impressive to our parents' peer group. Every family dinner included updates on David's latest professional victories. "Davy closed the Morrison account this week," Dad would announce with unmistakable pride. $3 million in assets under management. The partners are taking notice. Mom would beam and immediately start planning how to share this news with her principal colleagues and country club friends. My younger sister Lucia, 27, had chosen the path of community leadership and political ambition. She worked as a legislative aide to our district state senator, positioning herself for what everyone assumed would be her own political career. Lucia understood the Rodriguez family playbook intuitively. She attended every charity event, volunteered for high-profile causes, and dated the son of the county judge. "Lucia has real leadership potential," Mom would tell anyone who would listen. "She's going to make a difference in this community, just like her father has through his business success." The unspoken message was clear: both David and Lucia were building careers that would enhance the family's social standing and create networking opportunities for Dad's business. And then there was me, the middle child who spent her teenage years covered in flour instead of studying for SATs, who chose community college over a 4-year university, who dreamed of opening a small neighborhood bakery instead of climbing corporate ladders or running for office. My passion for baking wasn't just different from my family's expectations, it was incomprehensible to them. They couldn't understand how someone could find fulfillment in something that didn't involve boardrooms, power lunches, or election campaigns. Baking was domestic, small-scale, and worst of all, unpredictable in terms of financial success. "It's a lovely hobby, Camila," Mom would say whenever I mentioned my latest recipe experiments or my growing collection of vintage baking equipment. "But you need to think about your future. Principal Martinez's daughter just got accepted to law school. Maybe you should consider something more substantial." Dad's approach was more direct. "Small businesses fail, Mija. Restaurants, bakeries, little shops, they close within 2 years. I've seen it happen over and over again in my commercial properties. You want security? You want respect? You build a career with a steady paycheck and benefits." The family gatherings that should have been celebrations of our individual paths became subtle competitions where my siblings' achievements were highlighted while my baking was politely ignored or quickly redirected to more important topics. David's promotion announcements would dominate dinner conversations for weeks. Lucia's involvement in successful political campaigns would be dissected and celebrated. When I mentioned that I'd been hired to make desserts for the mayor's retirement party, the response was lukewarm at best. "That's nice, dear," Mom would say before immediately shifting to David's latest client acquisition or Lucia's recent feature in the local political newsletter. Our social circle reflected our family's values perfectly. Dad's business associates, Mom's fellow principals and school board members, and our extended family all moved in the same orbit of traditional professional success. They understood each other's achievements, respected each other's career paths, and spoke the same language of advancement, networking, and social status. In this world, my dream of opening a neighborhood bakery wasn't just unconventional, it was almost embarrassing. While David was building investment portfolios and Lucia was shaping policy, I was experimenting with sourdough starters and dreaming of a cozy shop where people could gather over coffee and pastries. The disconnect went deeper than career choices. My family measured success by external recognition, financial security, and social advancement. I measured it by the joy on someone's face when they tasted a perfectly executed cinnamon roll, by the sense of community that formed around shared tables, by the satisfaction of creating something beautiful and nourishing with my own hands. This fundamental difference in values set the stage for the heartbreak of my opening day. In my family's worldview, a small bakery wasn't just a risky business venture, it was a step backward from the Rodriguez family legacy of building impressive, substantial achievements that commanded respect and social recognition. Understanding this context makes David's engagement party even more significant. It wasn't just that they chose his celebration over my opening, it was that they chose an event that perfectly aligned with their values over one that represented everything they didn't understand about me. My love affair with baking didn't begin in some picturesque moment. It started out of pure necessity and a 12-year-old's desperate attempt to feel useful in a household that seemed to run perfectly without her input. It was the summer before 7th grade when my grandmother, Esperanza Morales, came to live with us after suffering a mild stroke. Abuela had been the heart of our extended family gatherings for as long as I could remember, the woman whose kitchen was always filled with the most incredible aromas and whose dining table could somehow stretch to accommodate any number of unexpected guests. But the stroke had affected her mobility and fine motor skills. The woman who had single-handedly prepared elaborate feasts for 20 people suddenly struggled to hold a wooden spoon steady or remember the measurements for recipes she'd been making for 50 years. My parents, consumed with managing her medical care and coordinating with insurance companies, had little time for the emotional impact of watching this vibrant woman struggle with tasks that had once been second nature. David was 15 and completely absorbed in summer basketball camp and his first serious girlfriend. Lucia was 10 and more interested in her elaborate Barbie world than family dynamics. I found myself drawn to Abuela's side during those long summer afternoons when the house felt heavy with unspoken sadness and frustration. She would sit at our kitchen island, her weathered hands trembling slightly as she tried to fold empanadas or roll out dough for her famous tres leches cake. Mija, she said one particularly difficult afternoon when a batch of her signature chocolate chip cookies had come out flat and burnt, my hands don't remember what my heart knows anymore. Something in her voice, defeat mixed with deep loss, broke my heart in a way I'd never experienced. This was the woman who had taught my father how to be strong, who had immigrated to this country with nothing but determination and had built a life through sheer force of will and love. Watching her struggle with something so fundamental to her identity felt wrong on every level. "Teach me, Abuela," I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. "Teach me everything. Your hands can guide mine." What began as a 12-year-old's attempt to help her grandmother became the most transformative summer of my life. Every morning after breakfast, Abuela and I would position ourselves at the kitchen counter, her frail hands covering mine as we worked through her mental recipe collection. She taught me that baking wasn't just about following instructions, it was about understanding the language of ingredients, the way flour feels when it's properly incorporated, how to tell when dough has been kneaded to the perfect elasticity just by touch. "Recipes are guidelines, Mija," she would whisper as we worked. "But your hands, your nose, your heart, they tell you the real truth." I learned to read the subtle signs she'd been interpreting for decades, the way properly whipped cream holds peaks without being overbeaten, how the surface of a perfectly baked cake springs back when touched, the exact moment when caramelizing onions transform from sharp to sweet. These weren't lessons you could learn from cookbooks, they were intuitive knowledge passed down through generations. But Abuela taught me something even more important than technique. She showed me how food could be a language of love, a way to nurture and comfort people when words weren't enough. When our neighbor Mrs. Patterson lost her husband that summer, Abuela and I spent an entire afternoon making her famous flan, not because she'd asked for it, but because sometimes people need sweetness when life becomes too bitter. When David came home dejected after being cut from the varsity basketball team, Abuela guided me through making his favorite chocolate empanadas, watching his face light up with the first bite. "You see, Mija," she said quietly. "Food heals what words cannot touch." As my skills developed throughout that summer, I began to understand why Abuela's kitchen had always been the center of our family gatherings. It wasn't just about the food, it was about creating a space where people felt welcomed, valued, and cared for. Her recipes weren't just instructions for combining ingredients, they were blueprints for building community and connection. The transformation wasn't just in my baking abilities. For the first time in my life, I felt genuinely useful, like I had discovered something I was naturally good at. While David excelled at sports and Lucia charmed everyone with her precocious personality, I had found my own special talent, one that brought joy to others and deep satisfaction to myself. My parents noticed the change, though they interpreted it through their own lens of achievement and productivity. "It's wonderful that you're helping Abuela," Mom said one evening after I'd successfully recreated her complex mole recipe from memory. This is exactly the kind of responsibility and dedication that will serve you well in high school. Dad was more direct in his approval. You're learning valuable skills, Mija. Cooking is practical. Every successful person needs to be self-sufficient. He paused, then added what he probably thought was encouraging. Maybe you could study nutrition or hospitality management in college. The restaurant industry always needs good managers. Even then, I could sense the disconnect between what I was experiencing and what they were seeing. To them, my summer with Abuela was about learning practical life skills and demonstrating responsibility. To me, it was about discovering a passion that made me feel truly alive for the first time. When school started that fall, I continued spending afternoons with Abuela, our baking sessions becoming the highlight of my day. I started a notebook where I carefully documented not just her recipes, but her stories about each dish, which ones she'd learned from her own mother in El Salvador, which she'd adapted for American ingredients, which she'd created to comfort my grandfather during difficult times. The notebook became my most treasured possession, filled with Abuela's handwriting on good days when her motor skills cooperated, and my careful transcriptions of her verbal instructions when they didn't. Each page represented not just a recipe, but a piece of our family history and a lesson in how food could carry love across generations. My first real moment of independent success came during 8th grade when I convinced my parents to let me make Abuela's tres leches cake for David's 16th birthday party. The original plan had been to order something elaborate from the expensive bakery in Albany, but I argued that a homemade cake would be more meaningful. I spent 3 days perfecting every element: the delicate sponge cake that needed to absorb the 3-milk mixture without becoming soggy, the timing of the overnight refrigeration, the precise sweetness of the whipped cream topping. When I carried the finished cake to the dining room, even my achievement-focused family fell silent. David's friends, who had probably expected some typical suburban birthday cake, kept asking for the recipe. My parents' friends complimented them on having such a talented daughter. But the moment that mattered most was when Abuela tasted the first bite, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Mija," she whispered, "you didn't just follow my recipe. You understood it. You felt it. This is exactly how it should taste." That night, I knew with absolute certainty what I wanted to do with my life. Not because it would impress anyone or because it fit into my family's definition of success, but because it felt like the most authentic expression of who I was meant to be. The validation from Abuela meant everything to me, but it also highlighted the growing gap between my passion and my family's expectations. While they were proud of my cooking skills, they saw them as a complement to a more traditional career path, not as a career path themselves. High school brought new challenges as the academic pressure intensified and my parents' focus shifted toward college preparation. My baking became something I did, when I had time, relegated to special occasions rather than the daily practice that fed my soul. But Abuela continued to be my anchor and inspiration. Even as her physical abilities declined further, her knowledge and passion remained sharp. She began sharing not just recipes, but her dreams, stories of the small cafe she'd always wanted to open, the way she'd envisioned creating a gathering place where people could find comfort and community. "I never had the opportunity, Mija," she told me during one of our last extensive baking sessions before her health declined significantly. "But maybe that dream lives in you now. Maybe you can create the place I always imagined, where food brings people together and everyone feels like family." Those words planted a seed that would grow over the next decade into my vision for Golden Crumb Bakery. Not just a business, but a continuation of Abuela's legacy of using food to create connection, comfort, and community. When Abuela passed away during my senior year of high school, I felt like I'd lost not just my grandmother, but my strongest advocate and the person who best understood my dreams. The funeral was filled with people sharing stories of her kindness, her incredible cooking, and the way her home had always been a refuge for anyone who needed comfort. Standing at her funeral, surrounded by dozens of people whose lives she'd touched through her generosity and her gift for hospitality, I made a promise that would guide the next 10 years of my life. I would honor her memory by creating the gathering place she'd always dreamed of, where her recipes and her spirit of welcome could continue to bring people together. The years following Abuela's death were the most challenging of my life, not because of grief alone, but because I was living split between two worlds, the one my family expected me to inhabit and the one my heart was calling me toward. College was a compromise that satisfied no one completely. My parents had pushed for a traditional 4-year university with a business or pre-med track, but I convinced them to let me start at Hudson Valley Community College with a focus on culinary arts and small business management. It's practical, I argued, using their language. I can always transfer to a 4-year school later. The culinary program at HVCC was nothing like the intimate kitchen lessons with Abuela, but it gave me the technical foundation I needed. I learned about food safety regulations, commercial kitchen equipment, cost analysis, and inventory management, all the unglamorous but essential aspects of running a food business that Abuela's home kitchen had never required. My instructor, Chef Jonathan Barnes, was a former restaurant owner who had burned out on the high-pressure fine dining world and found his calling in education. He recognized something in me that went beyond technical skill. "You have the fundamentals down perfectly," he told me after watching me execute a complex pastry technique, "but more importantly, you understand why you're doing this. Most students are here because they think cooking will be fun. You're here because you need to create." Chef Barnes became my second mentor, though in a completely different way than Abuela. Where she had taught me to bake with intuition and love, he taught me to think like a business owner. "Passion without planning is just an expensive hobby," he would say during our small business workshops. "If you want to honor your grandmother's legacy, you need to build something sustainable." Under his guidance, I started developing what would eventually become my business plan for Golden Crumb Bakery. We analyzed the local market, identified gaps in Millbrook's food scene, and calculated the financial requirements for opening a small bakery. The numbers were daunting: startup costs, monthly rent, equipment purchases, insurance, permits, and enough operating capital to survive the typically slow first year. Working backward from these projections, Chef Barnes helped me create a 5-year savings plan that seemed almost impossible. Even living at home and working multiple jobs, would need to save nearly every penny I earned while also gaining practical experience in commercial baking and customer service. My parents viewed my community college choice as a temporary detour before I got serious about my education. They tolerated my culinary studies as long as I maintained excellent grades and continued to help with family social obligations. The unspoken understanding was that this phase would run its course, and I would eventually transfer to a proper university for a more respectable degree. The first job I took to start my savings plan was at Sunrise Diner, a 24-hour restaurant on the outskirts of Millbrook that served truckers, late-shift workers, and anyone who needed a hot meal at odd hours. I worked the overnight shift 3 nights a week, from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., learning to manage high-volume breakfast service and understanding how to maintain quality when speed was essential. The work was physically exhausting and often thankless, but it taught me lessons no classroom could provide. I learned how to stay calm during rush periods when orders were backing up, how to multitask efficiently in a cramped kitchen, and most importantly, how to read customers and understand what they really needed beyond just the food they ordered. Martha, the night manager who had been working diners for 30 years, became an unexpected teacher. "Honey," she said during one particularly brutal Friday night shift, "the secret to this business isn't just good food, it's making people feel like they matter. That trucker who comes in every Tuesday. He's been driving for 14 hours and just needs someone to smile at him. That nurse getting off her shift. She's been saving lives all night and deserves to feel appreciated. You remember that, and you'll succeed anywhere." Her words echoed Abuela's philosophy about food being a language of care, but in a completely different context. Martha showed me how hospitality could exist even in the most industrial, efficiency-driven environment. My second job was at Thornfield Catering, the most prestigious catering company in the Hudson Valley. I started as weekend help, arriving at 5 a.m. to prep vegetables and wash dishes for weddings and corporate events. The pay was minimal, but the experience was invaluable. Working at Thornfield exposed me to high-end event planning, sophisticated presentation techniques, and the logistical complexity of feeding hundreds of people simultaneously. I observed how they managed multiple events in a single weekend, coordinated with venues and vendors, and maintained consistent quality even under extreme pressure. The head pastry chef, Daniel Kumar, noticed my background and began giving me increasingly complex assignments. "You have restaurant training but home kitchen instincts," he observed. "That's a rare combination. Most culinary school graduates can execute techniques but don't understand soul. You have both." Daniel taught me advanced decorating techniques, how to scale recipes for large quantities without losing quality, and the art of creating desserts that looked spectacular under professional photography lighting. More importantly, he showed me how to adapt traditional family recipes for commercial production without losing their essential character. Your grandmother's tres leches cake is perfect for intimate gatherings, he explained as we worked on a modified version for a 200-person wedding. But to serve it commercially, you need to understand how to maintain that same emotional impact while meeting food safety requirements and production timelines. These lessons were crucial for my long-term plans, but they also highlighted the distance between my current reality and my dreams. Working other people's events, executing other people's visions, and watching other people's businesses succeed was simultaneously inspiring and frustrating. My third income source came from private catering jobs that I booked independently. Word of mouth from HVCC classmates and Thornfield connections led to small dinner parties, birthday celebrations, and holiday gatherings where I could showcase my own style and build a client base. These private events were where I truly began to develop the golden crumb aesthetic, sophisticated techniques applied to comfort food concepts, traditional recipes elevated with modern presentation, and always an emphasis on creating memorable experiences rather than just delivering food. One particularly significant job came through a referral from Chef Barnes. A local art gallery was hosting a reception for a young artist's first solo show, and they wanted desserts that would complement the creative atmosphere. I proposed a selection of miniature versions of Abuela's recipes, presented with modern plating techniques but maintaining their traditional flavors. The event was a revelation. Watching gallery visitors taste my food while surrounded by original artwork, seeing their faces light up with recognition and pleasure, feeling the way my desserts contributed to the overall experience of discovery and celebration, this was exactly what I wanted Golden Crumb Bakery to become. The gallery owner, Rachel Morrison, pulled me aside at the end of the evening. "I've been to hundreds of these receptions," she said, "and usually the food is just background. Tonight, people were talking about your desserts as much as the paintings. You created something that enhanced the entire evening." That validation meant more to me than any grade or performance review because it confirmed that my vision was viable. I wasn't just learning to bake commercially, I was developing a unique approach that could succeed in the market while staying true to Abuela's principles. But the financial reality remained daunting. Even working 3 jobs and living at home, my savings grew slowly. Equipment for a commercial kitchen cost tens of thousands of dollars. Rent for a suitable retail space in Millbrook's revitalizing downtown district was higher than I had anticipated. The permit and licensing process was more complex and expensive than my business plan had projected. Most challenging was watching my family's patience with my phase begin to wear thin. As David's career advanced and Lucia's political involvement expanded, the contrast between their traditional success and my unconventional path became more apparent at family gatherings. "Camila has been working very hard," Mom would tell family friends, in a tone that suggested hard work toward an unclear goal. "She's learning so much about the food service industry." The unspoken question, when would I apply this knowledge to a real career, hung in every conversation. Dad's approach was more direct. "You've proven you can handle responsibility and develop skills," he said during one particularly frank conversation. "Now it's time to think about stability. Martinez Properties has an opening in project management. You could use your hospitality experience to coordinate client events and corporate functions." The offer was generous and showed genuine respect for what I had learned, but it would have meant abandoning my dream just as it was beginning to seem achievable. I politely declined, explaining that I was committed to opening my own business, but I could see the disappointment and concern in his eyes. "Small businesses are risky, Mija," he said quietly. "I've seen too many good people lose everything chasing dreams that don't pay the bills. I just want you to be secure and successful." His concern came from love, but it also revealed the fundamental gap between his definition of success and mine. Security and financial stability were important, but they weren't the only measures of a life well lived. By my 4th year of saving and planning, I had accumulated about 60% of what I calculated I needed for startup costs. The gap was frustrating, but more importantly, I was beginning to understand that I had gained something more valuable than money: the skills, experience, and confidence necessary to actually succeed once I opened. Working multiple jobs had been exhausting, but it had also connected me with a network of suppliers, potential customers, and industry professionals who believed in my vision. The foundation I was building was stronger than just financial, it was professional, creative, and emotional. The breakthrough came in early spring of my 5th year of saving, when Rachel Morrison called with an unexpected opportunity. The art gallery had been approached by a commercial real estate developer who was renovating the historic Willowbrook Commons, a collection of early 1900s buildings being transformed into a boutique shopping and dining district. They're looking for local businesses with unique concepts, Rachel explained during our phone conversation. The developer wants to avoid chain stores and create an authentic community feel. I immediately thought of your bakery idea. The space that became available was a corner unit in the main building, with large windows facing both Maple Street and the central courtyard where they planned to install outdoor seating and host community events. The previous tenant had been a vintage bookstore that closed when the elderly owner retired, leaving behind built-in shelving that could be repurposed and original hardwood floors that just needed refinishing. Walking through the empty space with the property manager, I could instantly envision how it would transform into Golden Crumb Bakery. The morning sunlight streaming through the east-facing windows reminded me of Abuela's kitchen, while the open layout would allow customers to see into the work area, creating the transparency and connection I wanted. The financial terms were challenging but manageable. The developer, recognizing that local businesses would need time to establish themselves, offered a graduated rent structure, below market rate for the first year, increasing gradually over 3 years until reaching full market value. Combined with my 5 years of savings and a small business loan that Chef Barnes helped me secure, the numbers finally worked. But there was a catch. The renovation timeline meant I would need to sign the lease immediately, complete build-out within 3 months, and open by early October to take advantage of the fall tourism season when Willowbrook attracted visitors for the autumn foliage. This aggressive timeline meant making final decisions about everything from equipment purchases to menu development while simultaneously managing the permit process, contractor coordination, and staff hiring. Most challengingly, it meant committing fully to my dream at a moment when my family's support was at its most tenuous. The lease signing dinner became a family summit that revealed just how deep the divide had grown over my unconventional path. I had invited everyone to Mario's, our traditional celebration restaurant, hoping that sharing this milestone in a familiar setting would help them understand the significance of the moment. "So you're really doing this," Mom said, reading through the lease documents I had brought to share my excitement. Her tone was carefully neutral, but I could hear the underlying concern. "This is a legal commitment, Camila. Once you sign this, you're responsible for 2 years of rent regardless of how the business performs." Dad studied the financial projections with his developer's eye, asking detailed questions about cash flow, break-even analysis, and contingency planning. His questions were fair and demonstrated that he was taking my venture seriously, but they also revealed his deep skepticism about the viability of a small bakery in a competitive market. "The restaurant failure rate is over 60% in the first year," he said, setting down the papers. "And that's for full-service restaurants with diverse revenue streams. A bakery is even more limited in its potential customer base." David, who had driven up from Albany specifically for this dinner, tried to be supportive while expressing his own concerns. "I've been talking to some colleagues who work in hospitality investment," he said. "The margins are brutal, and you're competing against established chains with significant marketing budgets. Are you sure you wouldn't want to consider franchising an existing concept instead of starting from scratch?" Lucia's approach was more diplomatic but equally discouraging. "I think it's amazing that you're pursuing your passion," she said, "but have you considered starting smaller? Maybe catering exclusively, or supplying other restaurants? Building the brand gradually before taking on the overhead of a retail location?" Their concerns were rational and came from genuine care, but sitting in that restaurant, listening to my family systematically dismantle my dream with logical arguments, I felt more alone than I had since Abuela's death. They were viewing Golden Crumb Bakery purely as a business venture to be evaluated for risk and return, while for me it represented something much deeper, a way to honor Abuela's memory, create community connection, and build a life around work that felt meaningful. "I understand your concerns," I said finally, "but this isn't just about profit margins or market analysis. This is about creating something that matters, something that brings people together and makes their lives a little bit better." The silence that followed was deafening. I could see in their faces that they truly didn't understand what I meant. In their world, business was about success metrics and financial security. The idea that work could be primarily about personal fulfillment and community impact was foreign to their experience. The dinner ended with polite wishes for success and promises to help however we can, but I left feeling like I had asked for their blessing and received their resignation instead. They would tolerate my choice, but they wouldn't celebrate it. 2 weeks later, as I was finalizing equipment orders and interviewing potential staff, David called with news that would create the conflict that defined my opening day. "Priscilla and I are engaged," he announced, his voice bubbling with excitement. "I proposed last weekend during our trip to Napa Valley. We're thinking about a spring wedding, but first we want to have an engagement party to celebrate with everyone." I was genuinely happy for David. Priscilla was perfect for him, ambitious, socially conscious, and well-connected in Albany's professional circles. They had been dating for 3 years, and everyone in the family adored her. An engagement was the logical next step, and I knew it would be exactly the kind of traditional milestone that my parents could celebrate wholeheartedly. "That's wonderful, David," I said. "I'm so happy for you both. When are you thinking of having the party?" "That's what I wanted to talk to you about," he said. "Priscilla's family belongs to the Riverside Country Club, and they've offered to host it there. The only date that works with everyone's schedules is Saturday, October 12th. I know that's getting close to your opening, but we were hoping you could cater some desserts for the event. It would be a great way to showcase your work to our parents' friends." My heart sank as I checked my calendar. October 12th was the exact date I had announced for Golden Crumb Bakery's grand opening. The invitations had already been printed. The local newspaper had confirmed the listing in their community events section. I had coordinated with neighboring businesses for a joint promotion of the new shopping district. "David," I said carefully, "October 12th is my grand opening day. Remember? I sent everyone save-the-date cards 2 months ago." There was a pause on the line. "Oh, right," he said, but his tone suggested he had never really processed the significance of my date. "Well, can't you just move it? I mean, soft openings are pretty common, right? You could do the official opening the following weekend." The casual dismissal of months of planning and coordination was breathtaking. My grand opening wasn't just a party I could reschedule, it was tied to contractor completion dates, permit deadlines, seasonal marketing campaigns, and commitments to other local businesses. "It's not that simple, David," I explained. "Everything is already coordinated for that date. The contractors will be finishing the week before. I've planned the menu around seasonal ingredients. The other businesses in the Commons are expecting." "I get it," he interrupted, "but this is our engagement, Cam. This only happens once. Your bakery will be there next weekend too." That phrase, "your bakery will be there next weekend too," crystallized everything that was wrong with my family's understanding of what I was trying to accomplish. To them, my grand opening was just a party to announce an existing business. They didn't understand that the opening itself was a crucial moment for establishing customer awareness, building momentum, and demonstrating viability to the community. Over the following days, I watched helplessly as my family's excitement about David's engagement overshadowed any consideration of the conflict with my opening. Mom immediately began planning her outfit and coordinating with Priscilla's mother about decorations and guest lists. Dad started talking about the networking opportunities among the country club membership. Lucia offered to help with social media promotion for the engagement. When I tried to explain the impossibility of changing my opening date, their responses revealed how little they understood about what I had been working toward. "Surely your contractor could finish a week earlier if you explained the situation," Mom suggested, as if construction timelines were completely flexible. "The seasonal ingredient thing seems like a minor detail," Dad added. "Customers won't know the difference if you serve the same menu a week later." "Maybe this is actually better," Lucia offered. "You could attend David's engagement party and network with potential customers, then open the following weekend with more advanced promotion." Each suggestion demonstrated how thoroughly they had missed the point. This wasn't about convenience or marketing strategy. My grand opening represented 5 years of sacrifice, planning, and preparation. It was the culmination of a dream that had sustained me through countless difficulties. Moving it to accommodate their social event would symbolically reinforce their belief that my work was less important than their traditional milestones. The final blow came when I realized that by choosing the country club for David's engagement party, my family had automatically excluded me from being able to attend both events. Even if I could have somehow managed to be present at both, the logistics would have been impossible. The country club was 30 minutes from Millbrook Commons, the engagement party was scheduled during peak bakery hours, and I would be needed on-site to manage opening day operations. They had created a situation where I would have to choose between my family and my dream, and they seemed genuinely surprised that I considered it a difficult choice. As October approached and the renovation work progressed on schedule, I found myself increasingly isolated from my family's excitement about David's engagement while simultaneously feeling more connected than ever to my vision for Golden Crumb Bakery. The space was transforming beautifully. The contractors had restored the original hardwood floors to their warm, honey-colored glory. The new kitchen equipment gleamed under energy-efficient lighting. The display cases I had chosen perfectly balanced vintage charm with modern functionality. Most importantly, the atmosphere felt exactly like what I had imagined, welcoming, warm, and designed for connection. Standing in my nearly completed bakery at the end of September, I realized that regardless of whether my family attended my opening, I had created something meaningful and beautiful. Golden Crumb Bakery would open on October 12th as planned, and it would succeed or fail based on its own merits, not on my family's approval or attendance. October 12th arrived with the kind of crisp autumn morning that made Millbrook look like a postcard. The maple trees lining the commons had turned brilliant shades of orange and gold, and the early sunlight cast everything in a warm, golden glow that seemed to promise perfect beginnings. I had been awake since 3:30 a.m., too excited and nervous to sleep. Following the minute-by-minute schedule I had created weeks earlier, I began the process of bringing Golden Crumb Bakery to life for its very first day. The pre-dawn hours in the kitchen felt sacred somehow, like a ritual I had been preparing for my entire adult life. By 5 a.m., the first batches of Abuela's cinnamon rolls were rising in the proofing cabinet, their sweet aroma beginning to fill the space. I prepared fresh batches of my signature items, the honey wheat sourdough that had taken me 2 years to perfect, delicate lemon lavender scones that showcased local ingredients, and chocolate croissants that rivaled anything available in Manhattan. The family-inspired creations took their places in the display case with special prominence. Patricia's passion fruit tarts gleamed with their mirror glaze, each one a perfect golden circle that reflected the morning light. Robert's Power Breakfast Danish, loaded with scrambled eggs, chorizo, and sharp cheddar, looked substantial and impressive. David's Champion chocolate croissants were arranged like precious jewels, their layers visible through the flaky pastry. Lucia's lovely lemon bars sat in neat rows, dusted with powdered sugar that sparkled like fresh snow. Each item had been crafted not just with technical precision, but with hope. Hope that my family would finally understand what I had been working toward, hope that tasting these personal tributes would bridge the gap between their expectations and my reality, hope that this day would mark the beginning of a new chapter in our relationship where my dreams could coexist with their version of success. At 7 a.m., my first supporter arrived. Jennifer Walsh from Bloom and Brew Coffee Roasters next door knocked on the glass with a bright smile and 2 steaming cups. Opening day coffee delivery, she called through the window. I wanted to be your very first customer interaction, even if it's just neighborly support. Jennifer and I had become friends during the renovation process, bonding over the challenges of being young women starting businesses in a traditional community. Her coffee shop had opened 6 months earlier, and she had generously shared advice about everything from supplier relationships to customer service strategies. "This place looks absolutely magical," she said, looking around at the completed space. "You've created exactly what this neighborhood needed, somewhere that feels like home but special at the same time." At 8:30, I propped open the front door and positioned the sidewalk sign I had hand-lettered the night before, "Grand Opening, Golden Crumb Bakery, where every bite tells a story, fresh pastries, artisan breads, community warmth." My phone buzzed with a text from Mom, leaving for hair appointment. "Priscilla's engagement party prep is taking longer than expected. Hope your opening goes well, sweetheart." No mention of stopping by, no acknowledgement that this was the culmination of years of work, just a casual good luck wish squeezed between beauty appointments and party planning. I tried to push down the disappointment and focus on the positive energy I felt from my space and the few early customers who were beginning to trickle in. At 9 a.m. sharp, I officially opened Golden Crumb Bakery. The first paying customer was Mrs. Henderson, an elderly woman who lived in the apartments above the Commons. She ordered a simple coffee and blueberry muffin but stayed for nearly an hour, telling me stories about the neighborhood's history and expressing genuine delight at having a bakery within walking distance. "This reminds me of the little cafe that used to be on Elm Street when I was a young mother," she said, savoring her coffee. The owner knew everyone's name and their usual order. It was the heart of the community. "I have a feeling you're going to bring that spirit back." Her words meant everything to me, validation that my vision of creating connection through food was already beginning to manifest. But even as I smiled and chatted with early customers, part of my attention remained fixed on the door, waiting for familiar faces that never appeared. By 10 a.m., a steady stream of curious neighbors and supporters had created a pleasant buzz in the bakery. Daniel Kumar from Thornfield Catering stopped by with a congratulatory bouquet and immediately ordered a selection of pastries to sample. "I want to see if you maintained your magic when scaling up," he said with a grin. His satisfied expression after tasting my croissants told me I had passed his professional test. Chef Barnes arrived at 10:30 with 3 of my former HVCC classmates, all of whom had driven over from Albany to support my opening. Seeing familiar faces from my culinary education filled me with gratitude, but it also highlighted the absence of the faces that mattered most. At 11 a.m., I checked my phone discreetly while preparing a customer's order. Social media was already lighting up with posts from David's engagement party. The first photos showed elegant table settings at Riverside Country Club, champagne flutes catching the light, and my family dressed in their finest, beaming with joy as they celebrated this traditional milestone. There was Dad in his best suit, raising a toast with David and Priscilla. There was Mom, radiant in her new dress, posing with what appeared to be several prominent families from their social circle. There was Lucia, looking sophisticated and happy, her arm around Priscilla as they laughed at something off camera. Each image was a reminder of what I was missing, not just the party itself, but the automatic inclusion in family celebrations, the assumption that I would prioritize their important moments, the sense of belonging that came with being part of their definition of success. But more painful than what I was missing was the realization of what they were missing. They weren't here to see Mrs. Henderson's face light up when she tasted Abuela's cinnamon roll recipe. They weren't witnessing Jennifer's genuine excitement about having a neighborhood gathering place. They weren't experiencing the quiet pride I felt watching strangers become temporary friends over shared tables and excellent coffee. The lunch rush brought a welcome distraction from my phone and the growing ache in my chest. Office workers from the nearby business district discovered my sandwiches made with fresh baked bread, families with children found my child-friendly seating area and mini pastries, and a group of local artists lingered over coffee while discussing plans for a collaborative mural project. By 1 p.m., I had sold nearly half of my opening day inventory, received dozens of compliments on both food quality and atmosphere, and watched strangers strike up conversations with each other in my space. Every measure of success I had hoped for was materializing, except the one that mattered most to my heart. During a brief lull, I allowed myself to check social media again. The engagement party posts had multiplied exponentially. Professional photos showed my family seated at a beautifully decorated head table, formal portraits captured their joy and pride, and candid shots revealed the easy happiness that came from being surrounded by people who shared and celebrated their values. One post from Mom particularly stung, celebrating our accomplished son David's engagement to his lovely Priscilla. "So grateful for our family's blessings and bright future." The Riverside Country Club outdid themselves with this beautiful celebration. The post had over 100 likes and comments from family friends, business associates, and extended relatives. Many of these were people I had personally invited to my opening through carefully written notes and follow-up conversations. They were at the country club, celebrating an engagement announcement, instead of supporting the business I had spent years building. The afternoon brought a rush of curiosity seekers who had heard about the new bakery through word of mouth or seen the morning social media posts from early customers. Many commented on the warmth of the space, the quality of the food, and their excitement about having a local gathering place. A local food blogger named Sarah Chin arrived around 3 p.m., explaining that she had heard about Golden Crumb through her network and wanted to feature new local businesses. She ordered samples of several items, asked thoughtful questions about my background and vision, and took beautiful photos of both the food and the space. "Your story is exactly what readers love," she said while sampling Patricia's passion fruit tart. Local entrepreneur following her passion, honoring family traditions while creating something new. This could be a great feature for the weekend edition. Her enthusiasm should have thrilled me, but I found myself wondering if my family would even see the article when it was published, or if they would be too absorbed in post-engagement party analysis and wedding planning discussions to notice my small success. As the afternoon wore on, the cognitive dissonance became almost unbearable. Every external measure suggested that my opening day was a success. Customers were happy, sales were strong, the community response was overwhelmingly positive, and early reviews were glowing. But internally, I felt hollow and defeated. The family-named pastries that I had created with such hope remained largely intact in the display case. A few curious customers had tried them, but seeing Patricia's passion fruit tarts and David's champion chocolate croissant sitting unsold felt like physical proof of my family's absence and indifference. At 4 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from David. "How's the opening going?" "We're having an amazing time at the country club. Priscilla's family is incredible. Dad is already talking business with her father. Perfect day for celebrating." The casual inquiry, sandwiched between updates about his perfect celebration, felt like salt in an open wound. No apology for the conflict, no acknowledgement of what his party had cost me, just a friendly check-in that demonstrated how thoroughly my opening had been relegated to background noise in their consciousness. I typed and deleted several responses before settling on, "Opening is going well. Congratulations on your engagement." By 5 p.m., the afternoon crowd had thinned, and I began the process of assessing the day's results. Financially, the opening had exceeded my projections. I had connected with dozens of potential regular customers, received multiple inquiries about catering services, and established Golden Crumb Bakery as a legitimate presence in the community. But as I looked at the empty tables where I had imagined my family sitting, tasting their namesake creations and finally understanding what I had been working toward, the success felt incomplete and bittersweet. The final hour before closing brought a few more customers, including several who mentioned they had seen social media posts from earlier visitors and wanted to experience the new bakery for themselves. The organic word-of-mouth marketing was exactly what I had hoped for, proof that Golden Crumb was creating the kind of genuine enthusiasm that couldn't be bought with advertising. As 6 p.m. approached and I prepared to close after my first day in business, I realized that I had spent the entire day divided between two experiences: the genuine joy and pride of watching my dream come to life, and the devastating loneliness of experiencing this milestone without the people who should have cared the most. Standing in my beautiful bakery at closing time, surrounded by the evidence of a successful opening day but feeling profoundly alone, I understood that something fundamental had shifted in my relationship with my family. Their absence hadn't just hurt my feelings, it had clarified our priorities in a way that couldn't be undone. The Monday morning after my opening arrived gray and drizzling, matching the emotional fog that had settled over me since closing Golden Crumb's doors Saturday evening. I dragged myself to the bakery at my usual 4 a.m. start time, going through the motions of preparing for my second day of business with none of the excitement that had carried me through the weekend. The weekend had been a blur of mixed signals that left me questioning everything I thought I understood about my family and my future. Saturday evening had brought a flurry of texts congratulating me on the opening, but they had all come after the engagement party ended, feeling like obligatory afterthoughts rather than genuine celebration. "Heard the opening went well," from Mom. "Hope you had a good turnout," from Dad. "Can't wait to try everything soon," from Lucia. Even David had sent a message: "Sorry we couldn't make it work with timing. Engagement party was incredible but would love to visit the bakery this week." Their messages felt hollow, like social media comments from distant acquaintances rather than communications from family members who should have been there for the biggest day of my professional life. The casual tone suggested they genuinely didn't understand why their absence had been so devastating. Sunday had been worse. While preparing for Monday's reopening, I had been unable to stop refreshing social media, watching as hundreds of photos from David's engagement party continued to surface. Extended family members I hadn't seen in years, family friends who had been part of my childhood, business associates who knew me personally. All of them had chosen the country club celebration over supporting my bakery. The most painful discovery came when I found photos posted by my cousin Maria, who had driven 3 hours from Syracuse specifically for David's party. Maria and I had been close growing up, bonding over our shared love of cooking during family gatherings. I had personally called her about my opening, explaining how much her presence would mean to me. Yet there she was in multiple photos, laughing and celebrating with everyone else while my invitation apparently hadn't merited even a polite decline. By Sunday evening, I was spiraling into a dark place I hadn't experienced since Abuela's death. The financial pressure of maintaining a new business felt crushing when combined with the emotional weight of my family's rejection. I found myself calculating how long I could survive if opening weekend sales proved to be an anomaly rather than a sustainable pattern. Monday morning's prep work felt mechanical and joyless. The artistic pastries that had brought me such satisfaction just days earlier now seemed like expensive indulgences that customers might not appreciate or support long-term. The family-named items that remained unsold from Saturday sat in my refrigerator like accusations, their perfect presentation mocking my naive hope for reconciliation. At 7 a.m., I opened the doors to Golden Crumb with professional competence but none of the genuine warmth that had characterized Saturday's interactions. Early customers seemed to sense the change in my energy, conducting their transactions efficiently rather than lingering for the kind of community connection I had envisioned as central to my business model. Jennifer from Bloom and Brew stopped by with her usual morning encouragement, but even her genuine enthusiasm felt distant and hollow. "Everything okay?" she asked, studying my face with concern. "You seem different today." "Just tired," I lied, unable to explain that my family's absence had somehow invalidated all the positive feedback and genuine support I had received from the community. The morning crawled by with decent but unremarkable sales. Customers ordered their pastries and coffee, complimented the quality, and moved on with their days. It was exactly the kind of steady business that should have made me proud, but I felt detached from the interactions, going through the motions while my mind replayed Saturday's disappointments. At 10:30 a.m., the door chimed with a familiar sound, but the voices that entered made my stomach drop. My entire family walked into Golden Crumb Bakery like a corporate delegation making an unscheduled inspection. Dad led the way in his business suit, leather portfolio tucked under his arm, his expression serious and focused. Mom followed, her critical gaze immediately scanning the space with the same attention to detail she brought to hospital inspections. David came next, looking uncomfortable but determined, while Lucia brought up the rear, her diplomatic smile already in place for whatever difficult conversation they had planned. "Camila," Dad said, approaching the counter with the tone he used for important business discussions. "We need to talk. Can you close for a few minutes?" The request felt more like a command. Looking at their coordinated arrival and serious expressions, I realized this wasn't a belated congratulatory visit or an attempt to make amends for missing my opening. This was an intervention. "I have customers," I said, gesturing toward Mrs. Henderson, who was enjoying her usual Monday morning coffee and pastry at a corner table. "This won't take long," Mom said, her voice carrying the gentle but firm authority she used when delivering difficult news to parents about their children's academic problems. "It's important." I flipped the door sign to "closed" and asked Mrs. Henderson if she minded finishing her coffee while we had a brief family meeting. She nodded sympathetically, perhaps sensing the tension that had suddenly filled my peaceful bakery. My family arranged themselves around the largest table like a boardroom gathering, with Dad opening his portfolio and removing several documents. The formal setup immediately reminded me of the lease signing dinner, but this time their expressions carried concern rather than resignation. "Camila," Dad began, sliding papers across the table toward me, "we've been discussing your situation over the weekend, and we believe we have solutions that could help minimize the damage." "My situation?" I echoed, feeling anger beginning to simmer beneath my confusion. "Sweetheart," Mom leaned forward, her voice dropping to the gentle tone she used when delivering bad news to hospital patients, "we understand the appeal of following a dream. But sometimes dreams need to be adjusted to align with reality." David shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "We researched the local market while we were at the engagement party," he said. "Several of Dad's business contacts have experience with restaurant investments. The numbers don't look sustainable for a small bakery in this location." I stared at them, realizing they had spent my opening day, while I was pouring my heart into serving customers and building community connections, conducting market research to prove my business model was flawed. The overhead is too high, Dad continued, pointing to spreadsheets he had prepared. Even with the graduated rent structure, you're looking at break-even requirements that are unrealistic for a specialty food business without significant capital reserves. Lucia, ever the diplomat, tried to soften their approach. We're not saying you should give up on baking, she said. But maybe there's a way to pursue your passion without the financial risk of a retail location. Mom reached into her purse and withdrew several folded papers. I took the liberty of researching some alternatives, she said, placing documents in front of me. The community college has a new program in hospitality management that would build on your culinary background. There's also an opening in the hospital's food service management department that could use your skills. I looked down at the papers, job applications, program brochures, and career guidance materials, and realized my family had spent the weekend not celebrating my accomplishment, but planning my exit strategy. You prepared all of this while I was opening my bakery, I said quietly. We prepared this because we love you, Dad said, his voice carrying genuine emotion. We don't want to watch you struggle financially or professionally because you're pursuing something that isn't viable long-term. The papers before me represented everything my family understood about success and security. Steady paychecks, benefits, advancement opportunities, and most importantly, respectability within their social and professional circles. They had taken my opening day as confirmation that I needed rescue, not celebration. What if the bakery succeeds? I asked. Honey, Mom said, her tone suggesting she was humoring an unrealistic fantasy. The failure rate for small restaurants and bakeries is over 70%. Even if you manage to stay open, the financial stress and uncertain income will impact every aspect of your life. David, who had been quiet during most of the presentation, finally spoke up. I ran projections based on Saturday's sales, he said, pulling out his own set of documents. Even if you maintain that level consistently, which is unlikely, you're looking at barely covering expenses. One slow month or unexpected cost could put you under. They continued talking, outlining my anticipated failure with clinical precision while presenting their solutions as generous lifelines. My years of planning and preparation were dismissed as naive optimism that needed correction by their realistic assessment of market conditions and financial sustainability. The conversation felt surreal, like watching my family hold a funeral for my dreams while I sat there very much alive and committed to making those dreams work. They spoke about me in third person, analyzing my situation and proposing solutions without ever asking what I wanted or how I felt about their intervention. We're not trying to control your life, Lucia said, apparently sensing my growing frustration. We're trying to help you see options you might not have considered while you're so emotionally invested in this particular path. But that was exactly what they were trying to do, control my life by making my choices for me, just as they had always done. The only difference was that now I was old enough and financially independent enough to resist their well-intentioned manipulation. I appreciate your concern, I said finally, but I'm not ready to give up on Golden Crumb Bakery after 2 days of operation. The silence that followed was heavy with disapproval and disappointment. They had arrived expecting me to be grateful for their intervention, ready to acknowledge that my dream had been unrealistic and accept their help in transitioning to a more practical path. Camila, Dad said, his voice taking on the firm tone he used when patience was running thin, we're trying to help you avoid a financial disaster that could impact your future for years. Sometimes the people who love you can see situations more clearly than you can when you're in the middle of them. Their certainty was overwhelming and almost convincing. Looking around at my beautiful bakery through their eyes, I could see all the potential problems they were highlighting. The high overhead, the competitive market, the uncertainty of customer loyalty, the physical demands of running a food business single-handedly. For a moment, I felt the old familiar pull of their guidance and protection. It would be easier to accept their help, to acknowledge that my dream had been naive, and to transition into the kind of stable, respectable career they could understand and support. But then I looked toward the kitchen where I had spent the morning preparing pastries with techniques Abuela had taught me, where I had already begun developing new recipes that combined her traditional knowledge with my own creative vision. I thought about Mrs. Henderson's genuine delight in having a neighborhood gathering place, about Jennifer's excitement for community connection, about the food blogger's enthusiasm for featuring local entrepreneurship. No, I said, the word coming out stronger than I had expected. I'm not closing Golden Crumb Bakery. The word hung in the air between us like a declaration of independence. My family's faces registered shock, then disappointment, then the kind of resigned frustration that comes when reasonable people encounter unreasonable stubbornness. Camila, Dad said, his voice taking on the patient tone he used with difficult clients, you're making an emotional decision that could have serious financial consequences. We're asking you to think practically about your future. I am thinking about my future, I replied, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. I'm thinking about building something meaningful rather than just secure. Mom gathered up the job applications and program brochures, her movements sharp with disappointment. We can't force you to make smart choices, she said. But we also can't support decisions that we believe will hurt you in the long run. The threat was subtle but clear. Continued pursuit of Golden Crumb Bakery would mean continued family disapproval and potentially withdrawn support. They filed out of my bakery with the air of people who had done their duty and been unreasonably rejected. After they left, I sat alone among my tables and display cases, feeling simultaneously liberated and terrified. For the first time in my adult life, I had definitively chosen my own path over their guidance. The freedom was intoxicating, but the isolation was crushing. The next few weeks blurred together in a haze of operational challenges and emotional turbulence. Running a bakery single-handedly was physically exhausting in ways I hadn't fully anticipated. The 4 a.m. start times, the constant standing, the repetitive motions of kneading and rolling, the pressure of maintaining consistent quality while managing customer service and business operations, it all took a toll that my years of part-time work hadn't prepared me for. More difficult was the psychological weight of my family's disapproval. Their absence from my daily life became a constant reminder of the choice I had made. No more casual dinners where I could share daily challenges and victories. No more automatic inclusion in family plans and celebrations. No more sense of belonging to something larger than my individual struggle. Sales during those first weeks were inconsistent and unpredictable. Some days brought encouraging crowds of curious customers and genuine enthusiasts. Other days, I stood behind the counter watching the clock and calculating how many slow days I could afford before my cash flow became critical. The family-named pastries eventually disappeared from my menu, not from any conscious decision but from gradual neglect. Without the emotional investment of hoping my family would taste them, creating Patricia's passion fruit tarts and David's champion chocolate croissants felt like reopening wounds that needed to heal. 3 weeks after the intervention, while cleaning out storage areas to make room for expanded inventory, I discovered a small wooden box I had packed during the move but forgotten about completely. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper that still carried a faint scent of vanilla and cinnamon, was Abuela's original recipe journal, the one I had treasured during our baking sessions but hadn't opened since her funeral. Sitting on the storage room floor with the journal in my hands, I felt her presence more strongly than I had in years. The pages were filled with her handwriting, recipe modifications, and small notes about family preferences and special occasions. But tucked between the pages for tres leches cake and cinnamon empanadas, I found something I had never seen before, a sealed envelope with my name written in her shaky script. Inside was a letter dated just months before her death, apparently written during one of her clearer moments when her stroke symptoms were less severe. Mi querida Camila, it began, if you are reading this, it means you have found the courage to follow your heart despite the obstacles others have placed in your path. I always knew you would, because I see in you the same stubborn love that brought me to this country with nothing but hope and determination. The letter continued with observations about my childhood baking, memories of our time together, and her understanding of the family dynamics that made my path more difficult. Your parents and siblings love you deeply, but they measure success by the standards of a world that values safety over passion, conformity over creativity. They cannot understand that some people are called to build bridges between hearts, not just bank accounts. Her words reached across years of doubt and recent family conflict to remind me why I had started this journey. Abuela had seen something in me that my immediate family couldn't recognize, not just talent for baking, but a calling to create connection and community through food. The work you will do, the letter continued, feeding people, bringing them together, creating moments of joy and comfort, this is sacred work, Mija. Do not let anyone convince you it is less important than building office buildings or managing hospitals or selling financial products. The world needs what you have to offer. The final paragraph broke down the emotional walls I had built to protect myself from my family's rejection. I am leaving you not just recipes, but a responsibility. Create the gathering place I always dreamed of, where people find not just good food, but acceptance, warmth, and connection. Build the community that our family, in their success and ambition, sometimes forgets how to nurture. I cried harder than I had since her funeral, but these tears felt different, cleansing rather than devastating, purposeful rather than hopeless. Abuela's letter reminded me that I wasn't just running a business, I was continuing a mission she had started, creating the kind of space where people could find the comfort and connection that she had always provided through her kitchen. The next morning, I arrived at Golden Crumb with renewed energy and clarity of purpose. Instead of the mechanical preparation that had characterized recent weeks, I found myself cooking with intention and joy again. I experimented with new recipes that combined Abuela's traditional techniques with seasonal ingredients and modern presentation. More importantly, I began actively cultivating the community atmosphere that had been my original vision. Instead of focusing solely on efficient service, I started learning customers' names and preferences. I created comfortable seating arrangements that encouraged conversation between strangers. I displayed local artwork on the walls and hosted informal evening gatherings where neighborhood residents could meet over coffee and pastries. Jennifer from Bloom and Brew became my closest ally in this effort. Together, we organized a monthly First Friday event that showcased different local artists, musicians, and small businesses. The collaboration drew customers to both our establishments while creating the kind of community connection that neither of us could achieve alone. The transformation wasn't immediate, but it was unmistakable. Golden Crumb began developing a core group of regular customers who came not just for the food, but for the atmosphere and community. Mrs. Henderson started bringing friends from her apartment building for weekly coffee dates. Local business owners began holding informal meetings at my tables. Families discovered that my weekend breakfast service provided a relaxed alternative to chain restaurants. Most significantly, I began attracting customers who specifically sought out the kind of authentic, community-focused experience that Golden Crumb provided. Food enthusiasts drove from Albany and surrounding towns after reading Sarah Chen's blog review. Young professionals working remotely discovered my reliable Wi-Fi and comfortable atmosphere. Elderly residents found a welcoming space where they could enjoy quality food without feeling rushed or ignored. 6 weeks after my family's intervention, Golden Crumb Bakery achieved its first consistently profitable week. The milestone wasn't just financial, it represented proof that my vision could succeed on its own terms, without compromise or family approval. The success came from focusing on what I could control rather than what I had lost. Instead of mourning my family's absence, I invested energy in serving the customers who appreciated what I was creating. Instead of trying to prove my worth to people who measured success differently, I concentrated on building something that reflected my authentic values and Abuela's legacy. During this period, I made the decision to hire my first employee. Jessica Martinez, a recent culinary school graduate with a passion for traditional Mexican baking, brought fresh energy and complementary skills to Golden Crumb. Having help in the kitchen allowed me to focus more on customer interaction and menu development while also providing the kind of mentorship I had received from Chef Barnes and Daniel Kumar. "This place has such a different energy than other bakeries I've worked in," Jessica observed during her second week. "It feels like you're building something bigger than just a business." She was right. Golden Crumb had evolved into exactly what Abuela had envisioned, a gathering place where food facilitated connection, where strangers became friends over shared tables, where the act of breaking bread together created community in an increasingly fragmented world. The validation I had desperately sought from my family was gradually being replaced by something more sustainable, the satisfaction of serving a genuine need in my community, the pride of honoring Abuela's legacy through my own creative expression, and the confidence that comes from succeeding on your own terms rather than someone else's expectations. 2 months after my family's intervention, I realized I hadn't checked their social media accounts or waited hopefully for their texts in over a week. The space their approval had occupied in my mind was now filled with concrete plans for Golden Crumb's future, genuine relationships with customers and fellow business owners, and a sense of purpose that didn't require external validation to sustain itself. 6 months after Golden Crumb Bakery's opening, the business had found its rhythm and identity in ways I never could have planned. What started as my desperate attempt to honor Abuela's memory while proving my family wrong had evolved into something much more significant, a genuine community hub that served needs I hadn't even known existed. The turning point came when the Millbrook Commons management approached me about expanding into the adjacent vacant unit. The former antique shop next door had been empty for months, and they offered me favorable terms to create additional seating and host larger community events. The expansion wasn't just about business growth, it represented validation that Golden Crumb had become essential to the district's success. But the proposal also forced me to confront how much my relationship with success had changed over the past months. The Camila who had opened Golden Crumb would have immediately called her family to share the exciting news, hoping their pride in my achievement would finally bridge our emotional distance. The person I had become understood that real success doesn't require external validation to be meaningful. I accepted the expansion offer and began planning a community celebration to mark Golden Crumb's 6-month anniversary and announce the new space. Unlike my original grand opening, this event was planned without any expectation of family attendance. Instead, I focused on thanking the customers, neighbors, and fellow business owners who had actually supported my journey. The invitation process revealed how much my social world had shifted. My contact list now included dozens of customers who had become friends, local business owners who had become collaborators, and community leaders who valued what Golden Crumb contributed to Millbrook's revitalization. I had built a chosen family around shared values and mutual support rather than blood relations and inherited obligations. 3 days before the anniversary celebration, I received an unexpected call from Lucia. Her voice carried a tentative quality I had never heard before, as if she was testing the waters of a relationship she wasn't sure still existed. "Camila," she said after exchanging awkward pleasantries, "I saw the article about your expansion in the Chronicle. Mom showed it to me during dinner last night." The article, written by Sarah Chen, had featured Golden Crumb as a success story in local entrepreneurship and community building. Reading about my bakery in print, described as an essential part of Millbrook's economic development, had felt surreal but gratifying. "The whole family read it," Lucia continued. "Dad was particularly interested in the financial projections and growth statistics they mentioned." Of course he was. Even my success had to be translated into his language of numbers and measurable outcomes before it could be recognized as legitimate. "We were wondering," Lucia said, and I could hear the careful diplomacy in her voice, "if you would be open to us attending your anniversary celebration. Not to take over or anything. Just to see what you've built." The request caught me completely off guard. For months, I had imagined various scenarios of family reconciliation, but I had never expected them to ask permission to attend my success rather than demanding credit for supporting it. "You're welcome to come," I said, surprising myself with how easily the words came. "But I want you to understand that this isn't about proving anything to you anymore. This celebration is for the community that has actually supported Golden Crumb." "I know," Lucia said quietly. "We know. We'd like to see what we missed." The anniversary celebration exceeded every expectation I had dared to form. The expanded space was filled with customers who had become friends, local business owners who had become collaborators, and community members who genuinely valued what Golden Crumb represented. The evening felt like a family reunion, just not the family I had been born into. Mrs. Henderson, now 82 and one of my most loyal customers, gave a short speech about how Golden Crumb had become her neighborhood's unofficial community center. Jennifer from Bloom and Brew presented me with a collaborative coffee blend we had developed together, named Esperanza's Legacy, in honor of Abuela. Chef Barnes surprised me by attending with several current HVCC students, demonstrating how Golden Crumb had become a real-world example of sustainable culinary entrepreneurship. My biological family arrived halfway through the event, entering quietly and finding seats toward the back rather than expecting special recognition. Watching them observe my celebration from the periphery rather than the center felt like a symbolic representation of how our relationship had evolved. Dad spent most of the evening studying the physical space and business operations with his developer's eye. I caught him taking notes about customer flow, seating arrangements, and revenue potential. His approach was typically analytical, but I could see genuine respect in his assessment of what I had built. Mom gravitated toward conversations with other business owners and community leaders, her natural networking instincts engaged by the professional caliber of people who supported Golden Crumb. I overheard her introducing herself as Camila's mother, with a tone that carried pride rather than the embarrassed qualification I had expected. David surprised me by spending significant time with Jessica, asking detailed questions about our menu development process, supplier relationships, and expansion plans. His questions were intelligent and genuinely curious rather than skeptical or condescending. Lucia found her way to me near the end of the evening, after most of the formal presentations had concluded and the gathering had settled into comfortable conversation over coffee and pastries. "This isn't what I expected," she said, looking around at the filled space and animated conversations. "I thought it would be smaller. More hobby-like." "What did you expect?" I asked, genuinely curious rather than defensive. "I don't know," she admitted. "Something that felt more like playing house than running a real business. But this feels professional and substantial. These people genuinely respect what you've created." Her observation reflected a fundamental shift in how my family was beginning to see me. For years, they had viewed my passion as a phase to outgrow or a hobby to indulge. Seeing Golden Crumb in full operation, surrounded by customers and community leaders who valued my work, forced them to reconsider their assumptions about both my capabilities and my choices. The most meaningful conversation happened after the formal celebration ended, when Dad approached me while I was cleaning up. "I owe you an apology," he said without preamble. "I've been measuring your success by standards that don't apply to what you're doing here." I stopped wiping tables and looked at him, seeing vulnerability in his expression that I rarely witnessed. "I understand building things," he continued. "I understand creating value and serving communities. But I didn't understand that what you're doing here is also building, just with different materials and different measures of success." His apology meant more than I had expected because it acknowledged not just that he had been wrong about my business prospects, but that he had been wrong about the value of what I was trying to accomplish. "I still worry about financial security and long-term sustainability," he said. "That's probably never going to change. But I can see that you've built something meaningful here, something that serves a real need in this community." Over the following months, my relationship with my family entered a new phase characterized by mutual respect rather than conditional approval. They began including me in family gatherings again, but without the expectation that I would subordinate my business commitments to their social obligations. I attended David's wedding, providing desserts for the reception and genuinely celebrating his happiness without feeling like my own achievements were being overshadowed. More importantly, they started referring customers and potential clients to Golden Crumb. Dad's business associates began booking corporate catering services. Mom's colleagues from the school district scheduled their retirement parties and staff celebrations with us. David recommended Golden Crumb to his Albany clients who were hosting events in the Hudson Valley. The referrals weren't charity or pity, they were genuine recognition that Golden Crumb provided professional quality service that reflected well on their judgment and relationships. Being trusted with their professional reputations felt like deeper validation than any personal apology could provide. A year after opening, Golden Crumb Bakery was featured in a regional magazine's article about innovative small businesses driving rural economic development. The piece highlighted how my combination of traditional techniques with community-focused business practices had created a replicable model for sustainable local entrepreneurship. Reading about my work in that context, as an example for other entrepreneurs rather than just a personal success story, helped me understand what Abuela had meant about sacred work. I wasn't just running a bakery, I was demonstrating that businesses could prioritize community connection and authentic relationships alongside financial sustainability. The most profound lesson I learned wasn't about family dynamics or business operations, but about the nature of validation itself. For most of my life, I had sought approval from people who measured success by standards that didn't align with my values or aspirations. The painful process of losing that external validation forced me to develop internal confidence based on authentic achievement rather than inherited expectations. Golden Crumb succeeded not because my family finally understood its value, but because I stopped needing them to understand it. When I focused on serving my community rather than proving my worth to specific people, I found both business success and personal fulfillment that sustained themselves regardless of others' opinions. The story I want to leave you with isn't about choosing between family and dreams, but about the courage to define success for yourself. Sometimes the people who should support us most are the ones who understand us least. Sometimes the validation we desperately seek prevents us from finding the confidence we actually need. If you're watching this and feeling torn between others' expectations and your own calling, remember that authentic success comes from serving something larger than yourself while remaining true to your values. It comes from building bridges instead of walls, from creating connection rather than seeking approval, from measuring impact by the lives you touch rather than the recognition you receive. I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. Have you ever had to choose between family approval and personal authenticity? How did you find the courage to trust your own vision when others couldn't see its value? If this journey resonated with you, please subscribe and share this video with someone who might need to hear that their dreams are worth pursuing, even when the people closest to them can't understand why those dreams matter. Remember that your path doesn't have to make sense to everyone, it just has to make sense to you and serve the people you're called to help. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is trust your own heart, even when it leads you away from everything others think you should want. Until next time, keep building your own version of community, keep honoring the wisdom passed down to you, and never apologize for choosing meaning over safety when meaning is what your soul requires. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.